Welcome to the bizval podcast. At bizval, we are passionate about empowering entrepreneurs the world over to understand and unlock the value in their business. We work with advisors and entrepreneurs to demystify the value creation process when building a business. At bizval, we know how tough it is to grow and run a business, which is exactly why we've made valuations simple to understand, accurate, and affordable. Our unique blend of tech and touch ensures that you always receive the best service, authentic human engagement, and data-led insights to ensure that you build a business that provides you with freedom and choice. In the bizval podcast, we showcase stories of real entrepreneurs and advisors, sharing lessons and inspiration from their journeys to make your journey just that little bit easier. And today's episode is something special. We often talk about deals, data, due diligence, but today we're talking about the human side of high finance, what it means to lead with heart in a world that glorifies hustle. My guest, Yeshvika Bahadur, or just Yesh as she prefers, is a South African chartered accountant, ex-investment banker, CFA level 2, turned writer, poet, and artist. She calls herself a newly uncloseted creative, and she's bringing humanity back into a world that's often too polished, too transactional, and too cold. Yesh, welcome to the show.
Oh, Graham, thanks so much for that introduction. And you actually didn't butcher my whole name.
So tell us a bit about your name. I believe your surname actually stands for something. So do you want to just share with the audience what that is?
Yeah, no, of course. I mean, I think there's something to be said about what's in a name, and so often I think there's emphasis placed differently in terms of like Bahadur or Bahadur, and I've just gotten it a lot growing up. So I really appreciate you taking the time even before this podcast. I mean, the listeners wouldn't know just to even ask me, about that, and what it means in Hindi. It means brave, and I think it's quite fitting given what we're going to talk about in this podcast as well.
Absolutely. And just talking about names, as someone who's got, either two first names or two surnames, which can be pronounced and spelt in a multitude of different ways. I get it. Nowadays somebody just says, "Hey, you," and I respond. So, but I always take the time just to kind of, get the story behind the name and how you like to be called out.
No, thank you.
So yes, let's we're going to have a conversation about your story, and let's start with your story. So 10 years in high finance, deal making, corporate advisory, investment banking, and a short while ago you've kind of made a decision just to, I guess, pause, reflect, spend some time on poetry, painting, and purpose. Tell us what happened.
Sure, thanks, Graham. So my journey, I what I seem to have found is that I needed more innovation, more creativity, just a different way of almost connecting the dots and finding new neural pathways through through thinking about things. And the best way I found to get that is through creativity and through innovation. And being in a very corporate high finance setting where one would imagine there would be some element of creativity, this is a space of deal making. It just felt that it kind of came across as very not very too structured and too we were almost missing the alignment, if I can say that. It's always great to have productivity, it's always fantastic to have a plan and be very structured, but in some ways and shapes and forms I also think that we are missing an element of alignment in that.
Yeah, I think that's so powerful. I think I chuckle sometimes because I remember one of my mentors earlier in my career said, business is not a spreadsheet. Whether you're in banking or investment banking, often it's just about the ROI and the ROEs and what does the 300 sheet Excel spreadsheet say. And I
Yes.
think often we forget that there's a real human heartbeat behind every spreadsheet.
Well, exactly. I mean, if you look at the systems and processes in place, behind those systems and processes are real human beings. And
Yeah.
I was, and you really want to be in an environment that empowers people. And I was finding in the corporate environment that we tended to exploit people more than empower. And obviously, exploitation has different meaning to some people than others. But I find when we move into a space of overproductivity or hyperproductivity, we are now just losing our humanity in the way we work and the manner in which we work. And so moving into this more creative space that I've always written, there's always been an element of creativity in my life. I did dramatic arts at school. I've, written poetry. I've never been quite brave enough to, publish anything, and I'm not sure I ever will. It's the idea of what speaks to one's soul and what is meaningful work to someone. And um I'm obviously not telling the listeners to just completely leave a corporate environment to go, and do something completely left field or something different. But I do want to get the point across where, if you are sitting in a space where something is just not quite connecting, or you're not getting enough hours in your day, it seems, or you're not finding that, as I said, you're doing meaningful work, then how can you incorporate a little bit of that in your life? Or how can you move with more alignment to who you are to then build out a life that serves you and serves humanity?
Absolutely. And that the sort of investment banking world is, quite, it's a cutthroat world. It's very competitive, and I suppose some people might be listening in and saying, well, you've got multiple zeros at the end of your bonuses every year. Stop complaining. I mean, that's one take on it. But
Yeah.
I think it goes a lot deeper than that. I think a lot of people are getting
Yeah,
to
I mean,
that
can
point.
I touch
They,
on that point, Graham? Like, if you mind, just, I
yeah,
think there's this idea of that the money makes it okay. That there's this. Well, if you almost pay for your soul in, well, you at least you're getting, cash that comes from it. And the greatest currency, I believe, I truly do, is energy. And where our, sometimes you find you just often, and maybe you can attest to this, but I'd love to get your views, but you just don't seem to feel like you have the energy per se, or you're not finding that like some things are connecting in a day, but you've had enough sleep. And what I think is that it's because we're not moving true to our alignment. We're not moving true to what is our inner compass, and what we're meant to do in the world. And so then what happens is that even though you might be really good at your job, I might be, and that's what I found when I was in investment banking. I really enjoyed it. I have absolutely no regrets in becoming a chartered accountant and being in the deal making space. But it felt exhausting. It felt like it was draining my energy. And there's really two parts to that story that I want to touch on. The one part of it is the the systemic nature of how the structures are built around environments in corporate, and particularly the deal making space. And then the other element of it, I think, is also idiosyncratic, and that's the alignment of, but how much of this journey and how much of it is uniquely my own story that just didn't resonate anymore, to me. And I
mm,
think those two truths, I mean, I heard a beautiful saying once, which was, there's fact and then there's truth, and you have to make sure that you hold space for both. And,
yeah.
it's very intertwined, those two things. But we need to be able to hold both of them because the both are true.
Absolutely. I mean, just looking at your story briefly, was there a particular moment? I mean, it's not as though you spent a year in this space. I mean, you spent 10 years in corporate, but was there a particular moment where you knew that you had to kind of, shift your perspective and step away, or was it a more gradual shift in your mindset?
I'm going to say both. There were times where I just, again, being very grateful to the opportunity I was given. And I think that speaks to a broader story, my systemic story, around an Indian woman being afforded opportunities, particularly being South African. That was just, I can't say I was born free because I technically wasn't born free, but I wasn't far off. So, in that generation space, I'm, just for the listeners, 34 years old. And there's this element of, feeling like it was, I don't want to say the word duty, but it's like you afforded such an important opportunity and honor to be in a space like this, that change it from the inside. Why don't you like have a different way of deal making can be done, get more women involved in this space, get more people of color that can have their voices be heard and seeing. um there was that sense and that feeling, and then the other side of it was also that element of, but yes, if it's not true to your nature and it's not true to what is the service and what is your dharma, we call it dharma, then maybe it's to still fight for your change and like make sure that the world is becoming a better place and that we are holding space for many voices, but that can happen in a different space. It doesn't necessarily need to happen in corporate. And again, I just want to say there's two parts to that, because I think that's also how systems do change, because I don't want this to come across in any way that it just means we should just let, like, because this is how I think listeners might see it, or how I've seen it is, okay, but then if that's the case, then we should just let corporates be run the same way that they're being run. And that's just not leadership for me when I see things being done in that particular manner, where we almost glorify the narcissists or the psychopaths, if you want to be so bold. And again, it's you can't diagnose people in that way. I mean, I'm not a therapist. I don't claim to be one. But if we are glorifying those attributes in our leadership, and I see that happen all too much and all too well in the world, then it becomes almost like this complacency that then the systems don't need to change, and that we just perpetuate cycles that just no longer serve us as humanity. I think we do need more empathetic leaders. We do need more compassionate leaders. I don't even feel right saying compassionate leaders. I think leaders and leadership encompasses compassion. And yeah, but I'd really like to hear your views on it. I've spoken a lot here.
Yeah, I think, I mean, you talk about the sort of hyper productivity that gets glamorized, and I think in the sort of deal making and investment banking world of high finance, it's almost like a badge of honor. My business partner in the US, Kyle, often talks about he spent 10 years in New York, having won a green card from South Africa, arrived as a 21-year-old.
Oh, wow.
And by his early 30s, he was completely burnt out, working
Yeah.
literally from 7 a.m. until midnight every single day, 7 days a week.
Yeah.
Um,
And
and I
that's not
think,
living, Graham. Like I think we
yeah,
think that that's living. It speaks to your point around money. Like that's you're you're there, but you're almost walking dead. Like it's not you're not actually building out the life that you, at least I wouldn't imagine so that Kyle was doing, but you tell me.
yeah, I think it's toxic. It's excellence, which is is it's disguised as excellence, but it's not. And this notion, I think the fundamental idea is that busyness equals value.
Yeah.
Um, but I've got a slightly different take on that, and I think if you look at a lot of the creatives and people who've changed the world, there's almost a degree. I mean, look, there's nothing wrong with hard work. Don't get me wrong.
Oh,
There's
of
almost
course.
a degree of like, if you're slightly lazy or you procrastinate a little bit, it actually leads to better solutions, because you mull over things, you brew over things. And when you're in that state of just work, 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 you never
Hmm.
get that time to reflect.
Well, that's why I want to
Personally,
almost, yes, I almost want to test when we say slightly procrastinate or laziness. Like that's the thinking I want to test. Why don't we call that alignment? It's all
yeah,
like, why don't we call that's just a period of rest? There's
yeah.
there's enough neuroscience coming out, and there's enough, like, I mean, and I don't want the podcast to almost go in that direction, because that's the explanation that we want sometimes as society. It needs to make scientific sense before we actually almost believe the lived experience. But the truth is, there are so many lived experiences coming out right now saying, this is one story of Kyle. Like, I'm sure I know plenty. You asked me on my journey and my story, and it's been
Mhm.
mine as well, where it's this idea of like asking for a little bit of time on something or asking, can we align? And you make another really good point, Graham, there around this is not a mitigation of hard work at all. No, I fully believe in striving, healthily striving for excellence. We definitely need to be a society that is productive and does serve, what I'm talking about here, and I think the conversation we're having is around when it gets to a point of too much and we almost start using language of coaxing and like we almost timid and shy to just ask
Mm.
for a bit of a breather, and I just want to understand why we do that, and I'm also very curious to hear your views.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. And you're right. The language we use can become problematic in itself. It's almost a subconscious acceptance of the status quo.
Mm,
For a lot of entrepreneurs out there as well, there's this focus on hustle culture and all of that. I think it is changing.
mm,
Um, and the other extreme also doesn't work. If you can't build a $10 million business, sitting on a beach working 2 hours a day using AI agents, like that somehow you're inadequate. Equally, that views so somewhere in the middle, there has to be a balance. I think you call it harmony, and I firmly believe that as well. But I think the language we use has to change as well.
yeah,
We need to be
no,
asking for forgiveness more than asking for permission. I'll use an example of, yeah, I've heard this in the investment banking world. It's like, something happens in the family, and the analyst sheepishly goes up to the principal and says, well, would it be okay if I take half a day off to attend to a family matter? Actually, it should be the other way around. You should rather say, listen, I've got an important family matter that I'm dealing with. I am taking time off, and I'll make sure my work's up to date. That's a very different framing of the same problem. And I think it starts there.
100%. And then that's compassion. That example that you just provided there, I mean, such a beautiful one. That is compassion. And in my story and my journey, it felt the lack of compassion. And there's beautiful work being done by Dr. Kristen Neff around there's what does compassion mean? Like intuitively we
Mhm.
know it, but to me, like I'm going to use her definition because it just works for me. But it's kindness as one, it's mindfulness as the other component, and it's common humanity. And just looping back to previously what I'd said around that's what leaves a person feeling more empowered in a corporate setting or in a work setting versus feeling exploited, is that if you treat someone with that common humanity and you be mindful to a situation, and that there is this embedded kindness, then you're gonna hit that productivity, you're gonna hit those markers, you're gonna build out
Mm.
a fantastic business. Because I mean, again, just connecting the dots around a business is people, it's systems, it's processes, it's not just evaluation of an Excel and numbers, and like the numbers on the sheet inform what human beings are doing in the background. And you can have as much AI, but I mean, I don't know now in the world, Graham, maybe there's going to be the robots taking over, but for now, we're the ones that are like in control of our destinies and of our lives, and we're the ones that are building out not only these businesses, but also how we build out systems and structures that move and can almost not almost that can change humanity.
Absolutely. So we talk about that, and we titled this episode "Bringing Humanity Back into High Finance." And I think to some it might sound idealistic, but like, let's get practical. What is this? I used an example just now, but what does this look like in practice, in your mind, Yesh?
So I think the example that you gave was great, Graham. It's like, when you have someone that has come to you and there's a problem and there's a dilemma, I look at practically what mindfulness means and what common humanity and kindness is, that you're actively listening to the employees in your business. You're actively listening to your clients. There's a conversation that's happening. And while that dialogue is taking place, you're you're empathizing with the person on the other side as well. And there's I think there's a multitude of ways that can happen. And I fully appreciate in the example that I've given here around active listening, you'd need another person on the other side also actively listening. So maybe I can give you an example that's of what you can do within your own, and it doesn't even involve having someone else in that conversation. Is that for me, it's finding alignment to an attunement in what is how does your nervous system react to certain things when there is a problem, or what we say in corporate is a fire needs to be put out. Triage. What is there really a fire that needs to be put out, or are we just working on such high energy levels and volatility levels that we're not regulated enough to just detect, is this a major problem or not?
Mm-hmm. So everything is a crisis. You're constantly in that crisis management. But I mean, I guess what you're saying as well is things like empathy and compassion are actually a commercial skill. Now, if I guess if we were to ask any CFA or chartered accountant, I mean, whether they learned that at finance school or at business school, I guess the answer would be a resounding no, right?
Well, well, that's part of the problem, I think, because the CFA qualification and the CASA designation, in my mind, that's a leadership qualification. And like I said, a leader has compassionate and empathetic qualities. That is what makes a leader. There is, if you don't have that skill, and if you do not have the ability to do that, then I cannot see you as a leader. And again, that brings me to my story of wanting to not wanting of leaving corporate, and that in an environment, because an environment in that space just seemed to not only glorify the hyper productivity, but it also seemed to glorify these types of inverted commas leaders. And in my mind, that's just not what leadership is. And again, I think we look at compassion as like a very fluffy word, but it involves it, and because people don't necessarily want to be vulnerable with it, we don't want to just have a space of being almost honest, because I think after this conversation I'm going to have a whole bunch of vulnerability hangover, Graham. I've said a lot, but that is part of the journey. It's progress, not perfection. It's taking a step back and saying, okay, I I understand where we are in history right now, but do we want to continue a legacy in this world that glorifies the same leadership style, or is just we're just not moving society forward? And that's really what happened for me per se. And I don't think I am just a unique individual in that story. I think there are a lot more people out there that are also looking for something different and questioning whether they are leaders, and questioning, because that's the reverse of this as well, Graham. The reverse is that they are, there's a beautiful documentary. I still to watch it, but I've watched some of the content online around Jacinda Ardern, who is the Prime Minister of New Zealand, and what she and how she talks about compassion, how her leadership, and how her um sorry, I'm just going blank on words, but how she got into becoming the prime minister and what people said about her. And, I wonder what the world would be like if she wasn't, if she didn't become prime minister, because for me and my personal journey, she embodied and showed me what was possible as a woman, what was possible as someone who looked like me and talked like me, and does get quite, like, I feel very strongly about this, and like it's almost like we take for granted our feelings in spaces of leadership, because it's be seen as too emotional, or you're getting or that's not, we need to bring the conversation back now. It needs to fit into some type of box, and I just don't think that box exists.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right, and I think as society we don't learn from our mistakes, but also like sensationalism sells. You look at what are the movies that sell? The Wolf of Wall Street. I mean, even though he's the anti-hero, everyone
Yeah.
celebrates him. But I
Yeah,
don't know if they've made a movie about Warren Buffett yet. But he's
and
also a
shit.
successful capitalist. But
Yeah.
I guess his story isn't as dramatic as the Wolf of Wall Street. And that's the kind of behavior that people put out there and celebrate. And yeah, sure, there
Yeah.
are some lessons out of that, but I think it
No,
misses the point largely.
no, of course. And I think you touched on another really good point. It's not that I am, you're dismantling capitalism, or I'm saying that, that there isn't beautiful aspects of certain systems. I'm just saying, perfect example that you said there, Warren Buffett versus a Wolf of Wall Street, mentality. There's, and I'm not saying every single thing. I mean, I obviously do not know Warren Buffett personally, so everything, I do not know everything that he's done, but the truth is like, how do we repair? How do we then make mistakes and then come back from them? And versus what you were saying now, glorifying a Wolf of Wall Street type of character and saying, okay, well,
Mhm.
that's just the status quo. Those two things are very different from one another. And I think that level
Yeah.
of discernment is what we need as a society and what we need as humanity is, sometimes there's words that get said and it becomes like, oh, that's, too big thinking, or that's like going to dismantle a system. No, no, we need to hush, or we need to put this stuff away. But that's the only way we're going to grow as humanity and as people, is that if we actually actively listen to one another and we hear what one another are saying without what I said from the beginning. I'm going to reiterate again. There is fact and there is truth, and we need to be able to hold space for both.
For both, yeah.
Yeah.
So I mean, you talk about in some of your writing about, concentric and compassionate leadership. So I want to just
Yes.
explore this a little bit, Yesh. What does that mean to you? We obviously often see leaders as somebody at the top of the pile, but I think this talks to something different. You want to drill down into that a bit?
Yeah, of course. Again, I don't claim to have all the answers, Graham. This is just my own personal experience. And I really want to say that on record, because that is leadership. That is the embodiment of leadership, is also to to show that, have humility. I don't know everything. I've experienced some stuff. I've had 10 years in investment banking. So there is experience. There's how I would like to see a world be and how people interact with one another. And I don't claim to have all the answers or know I'm right. And for me, that is a key component of leadership. For me, it is
Mm.
saying, you know what, I think I was wrong in that situation. Team, what's an idea, like where can we, what's the next step that you guys think is a way forward? That's, again, that's that active listening and that conversation. And it keeps bringing me back to this word. And I suppose a little bit of hesitation from my side to go deep into it, because again, I'm not the expert on it, but it's around vulnerability. And it's,
Mm.
and there's many things that can be said around vulnerability. A good concentric leader shows vulnerability. And but there's still a lot more work, I think, that needs to be done around vulnerability, from an explanation point of view. I understand it from alignment, I understand it from my lived experience, but it's a very difficult thing to give as a talking point, or a not a talking point. We can talk about it for days. I think it's the,
Mm.
how do we embody it? That's what I want. Like, I would, I'm not, in some places I'm not that higher power. I'm not God. You feel in yourself that it's that calling, it's that intuition of, this is the time I need to
Mm.
speak up now. This is the time I need to show up for my team. It's not, concentric leadership is also not this idea where, okay, you there's not direction. Like, I fear
Mm.
that sometimes we also think that concentric leadership is, if we listen to everyone's point of view, then we're not going to have any direct. No, it's actively listening. um can I say something? The world needs more people that open their eyes and that can see things, and that can see wrongdoings, or that can see, what good ways of
Mm.
leadership are. The world needs more people that listen better, that open their ears more. And they definitely need more people that speak out and speak out more. But what we feel like we're lacking is that all of that is meaningless and fruitless if the world doesn't have enough or more people that are able to open their hearts more. Because
Yeah,
sometimes we
I
speak in
think that's so
absolutes.
powerful. It is, I think all these stereotypes, the way that these systems work is, vulnerability is weakness, and the loudest voice in the room wins. All these sort of things
Mm,
that we grow up and are just force fed at us. The
mm,
reality is actually completely different. If you just look at this world now with all the social media and marketing and that, it's like loudest voice,
mm,
loudest voice. Now the reality, that just becomes noise eventually. So I think if you get it
mm,
right, things like vulnerability, being the quiet voice that speaks up at the right time, being available to listen to your team, is actually a superpower. It does make you stand out, but we need more people to feel safe, I guess, to be able to do that. Else you just keep perpetuating, I guess, what is a broken system in many ways.
100%. And safety is such an important conversation, because some people don't even realize that they're not safe. Like there's, you talk about physical safety and there's also psychological safety, and there's if you if you if you believe that this is what you deserve, if you believe that this is an environment that is, it will always be this way, then nothing really changes in that. And so you're not psychologically safe. But the only way to dismantle that is to find alignment. And I mean, there are beautiful practices on that as well. I mean, just to close off on what you asked around concentric leadership also starts within, and it starts with yourself. And to find alignment, practices such as meditation, practices such as contemplative thinking, because again, I think there's this idea of meditation is you sit in an ashram, or you sit like in a asana, which is like a sitting pose, and then you almost like there's a perfect way to do it. And no, a meditation is actually walking in nature. Meditation is, you know, um, just connecting again with people and finding that connection. That is the best way to explain or embody that vulnerability, is to connect.
100%. I mean, it's a fascinating discussion, and I
Mm,
guess we could go on for hours
exactly.
having
Well,
this chat. I want to deal with one last segment, and love to get your view on this. So we've spoken a bit about kind of the world that you come out of, sort of
yes,
investment banking, deal making, and that. But right now, there's almost a parallel shift that's happening, and that's a sort of digital shift in the AI era. Okay.
yes.
So we're moving into a world where everything's about digital transformation. It's AI, it's automation. In that context, okay, what does bringing humanity back mean to you?
Well, that's what the all the more reason to focus on intuitive practices and bring your intuition back into
Mm,
all spaces, not yeah particularly in a business setting, because now is more than ever we need better data. That, because if you think about artificial intelligence, Graham, it's only as good as the data. I mean, I'm an investment banker, so we've heard this term a lot of times, GIGO, garbage in, garbage out, like all the times. Like an evaluation in a model, it's like, if you give me garbage into this valuation, you're going to get garbage out. I mean, we've caveated with the management teams as well. We're like, you have to give me the best information that you have. And the same is true with artificial intelligence. If we're not attuned, if there's no alignment, and we're not putting in informed data into that model,
yeah.
then all we're getting out, again, it's what this entire podcast seems to, I love this golden
Mm.
thread that this podcast seems to have naturally found its way to, Graham. But it's that golden thread to, we're actually going to lose humanity. And you can have a whole bunch of people still alive and walking around, but that's not humanity. And I really want that point to be stressed, that that's not what makes us human. We're human beings. The being is important. We're not human doings. And that's not to discredit service and seva and, putting out there, healthily striving for excellence and good work product and good businesses. And of course, abundance. That's what money is, like it may have come across in the beginning, now that I'm just listening to myself back, that you almost have to pick between energy or money. No, not at all. Like there's vibrational frequency that money has as well, and that there is this abundance is both financial prosperity and energy prosperity. And it does matter. I think as human beings we think it doesn't, but it does matter how you make your money. And yeah, that's what I want to say.
I think that's important, just we can't just, say in this AI world, that people are desperate for human connection. I'll share a quick anecdote with bizval. When we started, we built an algorithmic valuation platform. And our original idea was that we would make it available and business owners could value their business professionally, investment banking in their pocket, in a short amount of time.
Mm.
And it failed in the sense that people actually didn't want to do it themselves. They actually wanted to engage a human being. They wanted to engage somebody who actually understood the pain and the challenges and the emotional commitment to building a business. They didn't just want to see a
Yeah,
number that was right
yeah.
on a screen. They actually wanted to talk about how they got to that and what went into it. And so we changed our model. We basically said every single engagement with us, you'll have an engagement with a human being. Um, and it's
It makes
fascinating because
complete
there's
sense.
something about that psyche which is important. We had to change our pricing model, we had to change a whole bunch of things, but it really was only then that we started to get real resonance and traction as opposed to just being an algorithm.
It's the interconnectedness that we crave as human beings. It's that
Yeah,
interconnectedness. And when you and an AI model just like I said, it just feeds only a set amount of data gets pulled into that. And again, it's the loudest voice in the room that will get pulled from an AI. So it's not surprising at all, but that's very interesting. So I'm glad you changed the model,
absolutely.
right?
Yes, I mean this conversation is fascinating. I'm sure we're going to have to get you back on for another episode. And I think it's just a bit of a teaser, in terms of
Mm.
how we look at the world differently. And I think we have to have different views and different perspectives, and not just keep repeating the same narrative. But we're going to do something fun to wrap up the podcast. We call it our rapid fire round. So it's a few questions. Don't overthink it. And we do it with all our guests. So I'm going to ask you a couple of questions, answer that comes to mind, and quick answers. You up for that?
Let's do it.
Okay. So first question: coffee or wine?
Wine. And I went quiet. I think it's because I'm going to need some wine after this podcast. I'm already feeling the vulnerability hangover. Great. I need some
It
joy.
depends on the time of the day. As long as it's not wine at 8 a.m. in the morning, you're probably
It's
safe.
5 p.m. somewhere, Graham. It's 5 p.m. somewhere in the world. Okay. It's bizval global. Remember? It's fine.
Okay.
No.
Are you a morning person or a midnight thinker?
I'm a little bit of both, but midnight came to mind first.
Okay. Who or what is your favorite poem or poet?
I don't have names right now, but poets from the Rajasthani, the Hindustani, like Indian classical music, Hindustani music is beautiful to me. So that would be an answer.
Fantastic. A few more questions. If finance were a poem, okay, well, if you don't have a title right now, what would the title be if you had to make up a title for a finance poem?
For finance poem, Graham. Oh wow, you've caught me off guard there.
I'm testing your creativity on the spot here, Yesh.
Oh wow, no, you can't test creativity, Graham. I thought that's what we got from this podcast. There's no testing here. Oh, no, oh gosh, no. I don't know. I
We'll
don't know.
we'll
I'm
come
going
back
back.
to that. What's the best piece of leadership advice that you've ever received?
Back yourself. Back yourself. Back your knowledge. Back your viewpoints.
I love that. Yeah, so too often we like, as you say, you have to ask for permission, and we're taught to be humble, but actually put yourself out there, and it doesn't, it's not arrogance. It's just be confident and
Yeah,
and
yeah.
believe in you.
Yeah, it's to be bold, not brazen, but yeah, and it's to also understand that for some people your boldness is going to be seen as brazenness, and you can't infer, influence, you're in what anyone else is going to think. You have to just show up authentically. So that's why I like that advice.
Right, okay, two more questions. Ocean or city lights?
Ocean. There's a calling to the ocean, always. Water sports, anything. I mean, avid scuba diver, love it. So always going to be the ocean.
You're living in the wrong place if you're in Josie. So
I know, Graham. There's a calling to Cape Town, I must say. But yeah, it's
last piece of it, if you could give one piece of advice, or if you could say one thing to every young professional in finance now, whether they, doing their articles or they're still studying, what would that be?
it would be to believe in yourself. And it's not it's not cliched advice. I think I hear a lot of people say that's very cliched. It's not. The word believe. So here's a bit of my
Mm.
creativity that's going to come out now, Graham. I'm going to make up for that beginning piece on that question. If you look at the word believe has lie in the middle of it. And so it's like, okay,
Mm.
is this all a lie, right? Okay. It also has the word live in it as well. So like, just the living and maybe believe the lies, whatever you want to infer from it. But there's also
Mm.
another way to look and infer what lie means. It means surrender. Just let something lie in some spaces. It's that acceptance. And then the other word is also to be live. It is also, though, when you surrender and you choose that acceptance, make sure that you're doing that in full aliveness of that. I think that so beautifully ties into what not only the serenity prayer, but also into
Mm.
when do we let things and accept them to as they are because it's just something we cannot control. When do we have to have the courage to change our behaviors, to change systems, the ways we are, because it's just no longer serving us? And that's courage. And then the wisdom to know the difference between the two. And that wisdom is above my pray grade, Graham. That's the higher force, but I do. The younger generation really believe and go after what is in your heart as well and what you do believe in and stand true to. And I think that's what the younger generation actually has right. So in fact, I wouldn't be surprised if some of this younger generation told me, yeah, we are doing that. It's just more of the older generations that need to come back, need to unlearn a lot of the things we've been taught and learned, and to really go back to some of those childhood dreams or those childhood, I don't even want to call them fantasies, but those childhood longings, because that's really what's gonna change the world.
Fantastic. Yes, it's been absolute pleasure having you on the show. It's been grounding, it's been inspiring, and maybe a little bit poetic. So thank you for being on the show today.
Oh no, it's been an absolute pleasure, Graham. Thank you. This doesn't even become possible with someone that doesn't hold space and isn't a true leader in that sense. And I promise you, Graham is not paying me to say that. I truly believe that. So thank you as well.
Thanks, Yesh. We're gonna have to get you back. And as our listeners know at bizval, we believe every story, every valuation at its core is a human story. So if you enjoyed this episode, please contact Yeshvika on LinkedIn. Her words are also worth reading. So check out her creative work as she bridges the world of art and analytics. And you can connect with us as always at www.bizvalglobal.com, where business meets meaning. Until next time, stay curious, stay kind, and keep bringing humanity back into whatever you do.